I remember the night it all began like a burn you can't forget. It was raining, not hard, just enough to make the streets shine like glass. I was sitting in my apartment, lights off, TV humming in the background, trying to pretend the silence didn't bother me. It had been exactly 1 year since my younger brother, Ethan, disappeared without a trace. No leads, no witnesses, just gone. One minute he was texting me about some creepy train urban legend he was chasing. The next, nothing. I had already gone through the stages. Denial, rage, the crushing weight of helplessness. Eventually, I settled into numbness. But that night pulled me right back in. My laptop dinged. I wasn't expecting anything. No job emails. No friends reaching out. Just noise. But when I glanced at the screen, my heart skipped. Subject: he's still on the train. From: unknown. No message body. Just those words. And that title. It shouldn't have meant anything. It should have been some twisted spam. But deep down, I knew exactly what it meant. Ethan's last text came flooding back. I think I found it. The ghost train. The one that doesn't run on tracks. I stared at the email for a long time. Something about it felt cold. Heavy. Like it didn't come from a person, but from something else entirely. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but I didn't reply. What would I even say? There was an attachment. A blurry photo. My stomach twisted when I opened it. A train platform. Old, rusted. The number 13B barely visible through fog. And there, on the edge, almost hidden by the mist, a figure. Slim, with shoulders hunched forward, head turned slightly, as if waiting. As if listening. It looked like Ethan. I blinked. Looked again. The figure was gone. I should have closed the laptop. I should have dismissed it as a sick joke. But something in me wouldn't let go. It wasn't just grief. It was instinct. The kind of instinct that screams louder the more you try to ignore it. I searched for platform 13B. Nothing. Not in Chicago. Not in the whole state. No news reports. No train schedules. Nothing official. But in the deepest corner of an old forum, the kind of place filled with red strings and blurry screenshots, I found a thread. 13B doesn't appear until the fog comes. It doesn't run on time. It runs on regret. My chest tightened. Another comment read, "Bored only if you've lost something you can't live without." The rest was riddled with warnings, strange rules, and one repeating phrase. Once you're on, the train decides when, or if, you get off. It sounded like nonsense. But that didn't matter. I grabbed my coat, my phone, and Ethan's journal, his old, worn notebook that I kept on my shelf, untouched. I didn't know what I was expecting, but the next thing I knew, I was walking through the rain, pulled by something stronger than fear. Union Station was mostly empty by the time I arrived. Everything fell off. The lights flickered like they were struggling to stay awake. The air was colder than it should have been. A station worker passed me, without making eye contact, muttering something under his breath. I followed the signs, heart pounding, until I reached the far end of the terminal. There was no platform 13B on the official board, just a dead end and a heavy iron gate. I turned to leave. Then the fog rolled in, thick, slow, creeping across the floor like fingers reaching out. And just as I was about to back away, a hiss broke the silence. A sound of steam, of motion, of something arriving. A train. Old, black metal, covered in frost. Its headlight glowed like an eye staring right through me. It stopped with a groan, and the door slid open. Inside, warm yellow light spilled out, flickering slightly. Empty seats. Velvet cushions. The air smelled like smoke and lavender. A small brass sign beside the door read, "Platform 13B, departing one regret at a time." I should have run. Should have turned around. But then I saw it. A jacket, slung over the back of a seat, just barely visible through the window. It was Ethan's. I knew it. The same denim one with the faded Iron Maiden patch he refused to throw out. My hand moved on its own, reaching for the rail, pulling myself in. The moment my foot crossed the threshold, I felt something shift. The air thickened. The lights dimmed. And behind me, the doors slammed shut. The train began to move. And I realized, too late, there was no turning back. The train groaned as it pulled into the station, its massive metal body screeching like it hadn't moved in 100 years. The wheels hissed against the rusted tracks. And for a moment, I stood frozen on the empty platform, not sure if I was dreaming or about to step into a nightmare. It looked ancient. Not old like the kind you see in museums with polished brass and velvet ropes, keeping kids from climbing inside. This was something else. The paint had peeled away in strips, revealing a skeleton of iron beneath. The windows were foggy and tinted, hiding whatever, or whoever, sat inside. A single lantern swung at the front, flickering weakly as if it was afraid of the darkness. Still, something inside me pulled me forward. I gripped the cold metal handle and opened the door. A hiss of air escaped, like the train was exhaling after holding its breath for a century. Inside, the air smelled of dust, coal, and something faintly metallic. Blood? No, not quite. Just old. Decay, maybe. The carriage was dimly lit by yellow bulbs that buzzed faintly overhead. Ornate chandeliers hung from the ceiling, some swinging slightly though the train hadn't moved yet. Velvet seats lined the walls, rich red, torn at the corners. Carved wooden panels stretched across the cabin like something out of an old Victorian film, elegant yet suffocating. Everything was too quiet, and the people, they weren't quite right. I saw about a dozen passengers scattered around the carriage. None of them spoke. They sat upright, stiff, hands resting on laps, eyes forward, not blinking. One woman's head turned slowly to look at me, her lips parted like she was about to say something. But she didn't, just stared. I gave her a quick nod and moved on. I passed the conductor's podium, but no one was there. Then, without warning, the doors behind me slammed shut. I jumped, spinning around, but there was no one there. I tried the handle, locked. Panic crawled up my throat. Before I could think, the train jolted forward with a violent lurch, throwing me back into a seat. The lights flickered. The ground rumbled. We were moving. I pressed my face to the window, trying to see where we were headed, but the outside was just a blur of shadows and smoke. City lights vanished, swallowed by a thick fog that wrapped around the train like a living thing. There were no announcements. No conductor walking the aisle. No sound except the steady click-clack of the wheels and the hum of the lights. That's when I noticed the cameras. Tiny black eyes in the corners of the carriage ceiling, watching us. They moved slowly, following movement, tracking me. I sat up straighter, heart racing. Why was there surveillance on a train that looked like it belonged in 1920? A rusted sign caught my eye above the next door. It read, "Car 2, obey the rules, or be replaced." Replaced? The train was picking up speed now, faster than any train I'd ever been on. My stomach twisted as the scenery outside turned into streaks of black and gray. I leaned back in my seat, trying to make sense of anything. A woman across from me whispered something under her breath. I leaned in, but the moment I did, her head snapped toward me. Her eyes were pale, clouded over, and her lips didn't move. Yet I still heard the words clearly in my head. "You shouldn't be here, Michael." Not again. My blood turned cold. How did she know my name? Before I could ask, the lights dimmed. The lanterns above began to flicker. And then, just as suddenly, everything went still. Outside, the fog began to clear. What I saw made my breath catch in my chest. Horse-drawn carriages rolled down cobbled streets. Men in suits and hats strolled past buildings with signs I hadn't seen outside of history books. An old cinema marquee flashed in black letters. Now showing, "The Gold Rush, Charlie Chaplin, 1923. I couldn't speak. Somehow, someway, this train had taken me back. Exactly 100 years. And I was trapped inside it. The train hummed beneath my feet, steady but unsettling. The kind of hum you feel in your bones more than you hear with your ears. I was walking through the corridor, trying to understand this strange place I had willingly stepped into. The air was thick with dust and something older, a scent like forgotten paper and rusted dreams. Every few feet, the gaslights along the wall flickered, casting shadows that moved just a little too slowly. There were passengers sitting stiffly in their seats. None of them made eye contact. None of them blinked. A few looked like they hadn't moved in hours. Or days. Then I saw it. A small brass plaque screwed tightly into the wall, just above the seat closest to the window. The edges were worn down, but the letters were still clear, etched deep like the train wanted these words to last forever. Rules for all passengers. 1. Never look at your reflection in the windows. 2. Never sit in carriage 4. 3. When the conductor asks for your name, lie. 4. If someone boards at a non-existent station, don't speak to them. 5. At exactly 3:03 a.m. hide. Don't ask why. I read them twice. Then again. The metal felt cold as I brushed my fingers across the engraved letters, as if trying to convince myself this wasn't some elaborate joke. But something deep in my gut twisted. These weren't suggestions. They were warnings. That's when I noticed something else. Below the rules, in faint, almost invisible writing. Each broken rule must be replaced. I looked up at the nearest window. My own reflection stared back at me, dim and distorted in the dark glass. I remember the first rule. Never look. My heart skipped. I quickly turned away, feeling the prickling sensation that I had already made a mistake. But nothing happened. Not yet. Trying to shake it off, I moved forward. The train rattled along the tracks like it was impatient, like it knew I was starting to understand. The next carriage was more dimly lit than the last, but the same plaque was there, nailed in the same spot. The rules hadn't changed. A man across the aisle suddenly spoke without looking up. His voice was dry, hollow. You read them. I froze. The rules. He didn't answer right away, just kept staring at his folded hands. You should have read them before the whistle blew, he said. Now you better pray you don't test their patience. Whose patience? I asked. He turned his head slightly, just enough for me to see the left side of his face. It was burned. Mistakes don't go unpunished here, he whispered. I took a shaky breath and moved on. Carriage after carriage, each one quieter than the last. It felt like the train was stretching, like the journey was longer than time allowed. In one of the seats, a girl no older than 6 was holding a teddy bear. She stared directly at me. Her eyes didn't blink. Her lips didn't move. But her head slowly turned as I passed, following me until I was out of her sight. I stopped and leaned against the wall, trying to calm myself. What had I stepped into? A train that had no listed platform, no known destination, and now came with a set of rules that read like survival tips in a nightmare. I pulled out my phone, hoping to check the time. No signal, no battery, no light, just a dead screen reflecting the faint image of my face. I looked away instantly. Never look at your reflection. I didn't want to know what would have happened if I kept staring. That's when the intercom crackled. Approaching carriage 4. My blood turned cold. I looked ahead. The carriage door was rusted, dented, and sealed with thick chains. But I could hear something behind it, breathing. Slow, deep, rhythmic. Like something waiting. Like something asleep. I didn't stay long enough to find out more. I turned around and walked back toward my seat. Every step echoing like a countdown in a dream I couldn't wake up from. I had boarded a train without a map, without a ticket. And now, it felt like I was riding through time itself. And something was watching. Something that wanted me to break the rules. Something that needed a replacement. And I was running out of rules to follow. The train moved faster than I'd ever felt before. Not just fast, unnatural. Like it wasn't sliding on rails, but ripping through something invisible. I pressed my hand against the window, but instead of feeling the usual vibration of metal and motion, there was only a strange stillness. No sound, no shaking, just quiet and a creeping pressure in my ears like I was sinking underwater. I leaned closer to the window, squinting into the thick fog outside. Slowly, the mist began to thin, revealing streets. But not the ones I knew. The buildings looked different, smaller. The cars were like metal boxes on wheels. And the people, men in flat caps and long coats, women in dresses that fluttered at their ankles, moved with a kind of old-world rhythm. A newspaper boy shouted something I couldn't hear, waving papers with giant bold letters. I could barely read the date on one. April 14th, 1923. I blinked, rubbed my eyes. No way. I looked down at my phone. No signal. No date. Just a black screen. A heavy breath caught in my throat. I stood up from my seat and turned toward the other passengers. None of them seemed shocked. In fact, none of them reacted at all. A woman was knitting with her head bowed. A man in a top hat stared straight ahead, unblinking. A boy played with a wooden toy, the same motion repeating over and over. It felt like they weren't real, or worse, like they were rehearsing some scene they'd already performed 100 times. "Excuse me," I muttered, stepping into the aisle. My voice barely registered. It felt swallowed by the thick, dusty air. I pushed open the door to the next carriage. A gust of cold air hit my face, carrying the faint scent of coal and something sharper, metallic like rust or blood. That's when I saw him. A tall man in a dark blue conductor's uniform stood near the exit door. He wore a sharp, buttoned coat, white gloves, and an old-fashioned conductor's hat tilted low over his eyes. His posture was too still, like a statue waiting to come alive. "Hey," I said. "Where are we? What's going on?" He slowly turned his head toward me. I expected surprise, or confusion, or at least a human expression. But his face was blank, stretched tight, as if it were remembering how to move. Then he smiled. It wasn't warm. "You made it back," he said, voice smooth and cold like glass. "This isn't your first ride, is it, Michael?" My blood froze. "How do you know my name?" I asked. He tipped his hat slightly. "Names have a way of repeating. Like time." My fingers curled around the brass handle of the seat beside me. "What is this place? This train?" He turned his back to me and walked toward the exit door at the end of the carriage. Just before he vanished behind it, he spoke again. "This train only moves in one direction, backward." Then he was gone. I stood there, heart pounding, trying to make sense of his words. The lights above flickered once, twice, and for a split second, every window reflected not me, but a much older version of myself. Eyes hollow, face pale, wearing the same clothes as the man who just left. And then it was gone. The train groaned like it was breathing. I sat back down, trying to control my breathing. But one thought kept clawing its way into my mind. If this train was going backward through time, how far would it go before it let me off? The train hummed beneath my feet like it was alive, breathing in a slow, metallic rhythm. I had just passed the fourth carriage when I felt it. The air shifted. Colder. Thicker. Like something unseen had exhaled across the back of my neck. That was when I heard the voice. "Sir." It was small. Fragile. A child's voice. I turned. A little boy stood in the aisle. Maybe 7 or 8 years old. Pale face, sunken eyes, clothes from another century. Pressed trousers and suspenders, like he stepped out of an old photo. He clutched a stuffed rabbit missing one eye. "You can sit with me," he said, motioning to carriage 4. I froze. Carriage 4. Never sit in carriage 4. That was rule 2. The boy blinked slowly, as if he didn't really need to. "You look lonely." "I don't like sitting alone." There was something off about him. His skin wasn't just pale, it was grayish. Like he hadn't felt sunlight in years. And behind him, the inside of carriage 4 looked wrong. The lighting was dimmer, flickering unnaturally. Shadows didn't sit where they should. One of the windows had no reflection. Just blackness. "No thanks," I said, stepping back. The boy's lips twitched. Not into a smile, but a sort of knowing. "You'll have to come eventually," he whispered. "Everyone does." He turned and walked into the carriage. As soon as he crossed the doorway, I heard the sound. Whispering. Low and rapid, like 100 people speaking at once. I leaned forward just slightly, trying to make out what they were saying, but all I caught was my name. My name, repeated again and again, like a chant. I stumbled back, heart racing. The door to carriage 4 slammed shut. And then silence. I backed away until I was several carriages down, gripping a metal handrail, so tightly my knuckles turned white. My breathing was shallow, and I realized I hadn't blinked in what felt like a full minute. A passenger across from me looked up, eyes glassy and unfocused. "You almost went in, didn't you?" she said. I nodded slowly. She shook her head. "The boy's been asking strangers for decades. Ever since he sat there. What happens if someone sits with him?" I asked. She looked down at her lap. "They never come back." The silence between us hung heavy. The train rattled, and the lights flickered once. Just once. But in that flicker, I swore I saw a face pressed against the window of carriage 4. Not the boy. Someone older. Watching me. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I couldn't. Because I didn't dare. I don't remember falling asleep, but I woke up with the taste of cold metal in my mouth. The train rocked gently beneath me, like it was drifting on a black ocean. The lights had dimmed to a sickly yellow glow. My watch was dead, frozen at 2:47 a.m. I sat up, heart pounding, and realized I wasn't alone. He stood at the end of the carriage. Tall, pale, wearing a perfectly pressed black conductor's uniform that looked too clean for how dusty the rest of the train was. His hat sat low, shadowing his eyes, but I could still feel them on me, watching. The air turned colder as he stepped closer. Each footfall was soft, yet somehow louder than the creak of the train. "Evening, Michael," he said, his voice smooth and slow, like syrup dripping from a rusty faucet. I froze. I never told him my name. "You're not from around here, are you?" he asked, tilting his head. "You don't look like someone who rides this train often." I tried to keep calm. I remembered Rule 3. When the conductor asks for your name, lie. "Name?" he asked again, eyes narrowing. I swallowed and forced a smile. "James. James Carter." He blinked, then smiled, showing teeth too perfect to be real. "James Carter," he repeated slowly. "That's a nice name." He leaned in, close enough for me to smell something under his cologne, something old like burnt paper and decayed wood. "But it's not yours, is it?" The lights flickered. A loud groan echoed from the back of the train. Something heavy shifting. I stayed still. He didn't break eye contact. "I'm Adam." "The conductor." He straightened his cuffs. "It's my job to keep things running, and to make sure passengers follow the rules." My mind was racing. I had to be careful. Adam reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, leather-bound book. It looked ancient, the corners torn, the cover scratched. He held it out to me like a gift. "Thought this might belong to you." I took it hesitantly. My hands shook the moment I saw the name written on the first page. Daniel Thorne. My brother. I flipped through quickly, heart hammering. The handwriting was his. Pages filled with sketches, maps, notes about the train, strange symbols, names of people, places he saw. And then I found the last page. The words were jagged, written in haste. I broke a rule. I told him my real name. He smiled. He said I'd ride forever now. My breath caught in my throat. Adam stepped back, watching me read. "Rules are very important here, Michael. They're not for control. They're for balance." I looked up, clutching the book. What happened to him? Adam's face remained calm, but his eyes darkened. "He chose poorly. You still have a choice." He turned and walked toward the door, leading to the next carriage. But before he stepped through, he paused. "One more thing," he said without looking back. "If you find yourself alone at 3:03 a.m. hide." Then he was gone. I sat there, the book heavy in my hands. The walls of the train felt closer now, the lights dimmer. Somewhere in the distance, I heard a soft ticking sound, counting down, and I realized something terrible. I wasn't just riding this train. I was playing its game, and I had already lost the first round. I didn't know what to expect when the clock struck 3:03 a.m. Maybe I should have known something was wrong, but the train had already turned everything upside down, and by then, I was too deep in it to think straight. The first warning came quietly, like a whisper through the speakers, too faint to catch at first. Then it grew louder, more urgent, a voice cold and mechanical. 3:03 a.m. A chill crawled up my spine. I looked around, but nothing seemed out of place. The passengers sat still, as they had the entire ride. Too still, their faces almost statuesque. No one seemed to react. It felt like the whole world had gone still, like even the air had stopped moving. The train hummed along, as if everything were normal. But something was off. Something about the silence made my skin prickle, my heart race. I checked my watch. It wasn't a mistake. 3:03 a.m. I had no idea what that meant, but the rules on the walls came rushing back. At exactly 3:03 a.m. hide. Don't ask why. It was too late to ask questions. I bolted from my seat and ducked under the nearest row, crawling beneath the legs of two passengers whose faces I couldn't even see. I didn't care. I just needed to hide. I tucked myself in tight, feeling the cold metal of the floor pressing into my ribs. The hum of the train was louder now, but the air felt thick, heavy, like the train itself was waiting for something. Waiting for me to do something wrong. That's when the alarm went off. It wasn't a traditional alarm, not like anything I'd heard before. It sounded more like a voice screaming from somewhere deep in the bowels of the train. It wasn't human. It was guttural, distorted, like 1,000 voices crying out in agony. My breath hitched. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying not to make sound. I could hear it, the sound of metal scraping, of something large and heavy moving down the aisles. My heart thundered in my chest, and my fingers dug into the cracks between the wooden floorboards, trying to hold on to something solid. Then the air shifted. I felt it before I heard it. A shadow, passing over me, brushing against the seat I was hiding under. It was there, close enough to feel the cold it carried. I could hear it breathing, if you could call it breathing. It wasn't human. It couldn't be. There was something wrong with the way it moved. Like it was hovering, gliding, without touching the ground. I held my breath, terrified to make a sound. The thing stopped directly above me. My skin crawled as I felt its presence, cold, dark, and suffocating. And then, I heard it speak. Michael Harrow. It wasn't a whisper. It wasn't even a voice. It was more like a command, ringing in my ears, filling every corner of my mind. I froze, too afraid to move, too afraid to breathe. It knew my name. Michael. It repeated, dragging the word out like it was savoring the taste of it. I could hear it now, moving closer, its limbs creaking as if they were made of old wood. I barely dared to move, but I knew this thing, whatever it was searching for me. And if it found me, I didn't know what would happen. I counted the seconds in my head, praying to every god I could think of that it would leave. The seconds dragged on forever. And then, I heard a sound, the door to the next carriage sliding open. The creature paused, its head tilting in the direction of the door. It seemed confused, momentarily distracted. I didn't wait to find out what would happen if it found me. I waited for the right moment, and when I heard the thing shuffle away toward the other carriage, I bolted from my hiding spot. My heart was pounding in my throat. I didn't care what happened to the others on the train. I had to get out of that carriage, and fast. I didn't think about the rules anymore. I didn't care. I had to move, had to get away from that thing. I scrambled over seats, pushing past terrified passengers who were too paralyzed to help, too frozen in the grip of fear to do anything. When I reached the end of the carriage, I slammed my hand against the door, but it didn't budge. I cursed, my breath ragged as I hammered my fist against the glass. The thing was close again, I could feel it. But then, something strange happened. The train jerked violently, as if something massive had collided with it. For a split second, everything was still. The lights flickered, the whole train screeching as if it was being torn apart. I lost my balance and fell hard, my body crashing into a seat. And just as quickly, everything stopped. The hum of the train faded into an eerie silence again. I didn't move. I couldn't. I wasn't sure if I had just escaped or if something worse was coming. But I knew one thing for sure. The train had just made a decision. And I wasn't sure I was going to like what came next. I don't know what possessed me to step in a carriage for. I'd already broken enough rules just by being here, but something inside me, maybe desperation, maybe curiosity, pushed me forward. The air in the carriage was thick, cold, like it hadn't been touched in years. The smell of dust and old leather wrapped around me, mingling with the musty scent of time itself. It was like stepping into a forgotten room in a house that hadn't been lived in for decades. The door shut behind me with a dull thud, and the train rumbled forward, as though nothing was wrong. I hesitated for a moment, feeling the pull of the place. There were no passengers in sight. The velvet seats were unoccupied, save for a few scattered newspapers and a half-finished cup of coffee on a table. But it wasn't the absence of people that unsettled me. It was the stillness, the unnatural quiet that hung in the air, heavier than the silence of the train's other carriages. As I walked deeper into the carriage, I felt an eerie sensation in the pit of my stomach, a feeling that I was being watched, even though the carriage was completely empty. I couldn't shake the sense that something wasn't right, not just about this place, but about me, about what I was doing here. Was it all some kind of test? Or worse, a punishment? That's when I saw them. At first, I thought they were statues. Tall, gaunt figures sitting perfectly still in their seats, eyes wide open, staring straight ahead. Their faces were pale, almost ghostly, as if life had drained from them long ago. But there was something about them, the way their eyes seemed to follow me, even though their bodies didn't move, that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I took a step closer to one of them, a man in a brown coat with a fraying collar. His expression was frozen, but his eyes were alive. There was no doubt in my mind. He was conscious, trapped in a moment that never ended. I swallowed hard. My heart started to pound in my chest. This was it. This was where they went. The lost souls, the ones who didn't make it. Those who broke the rules. I looked around, my pulse quickening as the realization settled in. I couldn't leave. Not yet. I needed answers. I needed to know if my brother was here, if he'd somehow ended up like these people. They were frozen in time, weren't they? Or was it something worse? Maybe they were alive, but stuck in some kind of eternal pause, trapped in this place, forever repeating the moment they disobeyed. I slowly made my way down the row of passengers, glancing at their faces as I passed. The woman in a dark blue dress, her eyes staring out the window, her hands folded neatly in her lap. A child with his teddy bear, sitting perfectly still, his wide, vacant eyes locked onto mine. A man with a fedora, his mouth slightly open, as if he was speaking, but had never finished the word. I stopped in front of one of the seats near the back. There, slumped over, was someone I recognized. My brother. His face was pale, his eyes wide open but not blinking, staring blankly ahead as though he'd seen something he couldn't unsee. His body was still, lifeless, yet he wasn't dead. Not really. I took a deep breath and knelt beside him, trembling as I reached out to touch his arm. The skin was cold, but it wasn't stiff like a corpse. It felt normal. Too normal. Like he was caught in some kind of endless dream. Like he was waiting for something. Waiting for me. I whispered his name, but he didn't respond. I shook him gently, but there was no reaction. His eyes didn't even blink. Adam, I muttered under my breath. What have you done to us? I stood up, my knees weak as I backed away from my brother. The reality of it all hit me like a punch to the stomach. This train, this thing, it wasn't just some twisted ride through time. It was a prison, a trap for the guilty, the lost, the ones who had broken the rules. The man in the brown coat, the one sitting still, staring at nothing, suddenly turned his head. I froze, my heart skipping a beat. His gaze locked onto mine. For a moment, I thought I was imagining it. But no, his eyes were filled with something. Recognition. A plea for help. Maybe? Or perhaps something darker. A warning. Before I could even take a step back, the lights flickered, casting long shadows across the carriage. The air grew colder, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop by several degrees. I could see my breath misting in the air now, my hands shaking as I wrapped them around my arms, trying to keep warm. Then, without warning, the voice of Adam crackled through the loudspeaker, his voice calm, almost soothing. You found them. The lost souls. They will remain here until the rules are obeyed. You can't save them. They are part of the system now. I looked around in a panic. The passengers, frozen in place, remained motionless. Their lives were gone, and they had no idea they were even trapped. But Adam, he knew exactly what was happening. He knew the consequences of breaking the rules. And now, I was stuck here too, with no way out. I'm not leaving without him, I said through gritted teeth. I wasn't sure if I was talking to myself, or to the ghostly conductor, but it didn't matter. I couldn't walk away from my brother, not now. Not when I could still save him. I turned back toward the seat where my brother sat, my heart pounding, as if I could somehow pull him out of this time loop, this nightmare. But then, something shifted in the corner of my eye. A shape, a figure emerging from the shadows in the far end of the carriage. It was a woman, her face obscured by a veil, her presence unsettling. She didn't belong here. Not in this place. She stepped forward, her heels clicking sharply against the floor, and as she did, I saw the shadows around her twist and bend. You shouldn't have come, she whispered, her voice like 1,000 dry leaves scratching against stone. I turned to face her fully, my heart racing. It's too late for you, she continued, stepping closer. The rules have already been broken. And then, just as quickly as she appeared, she vanished, leaving behind only a cold, empty silence. The train jerked violently, and I was thrown against the seat. The time loop was closing in on me. I didn't know how much longer I had before I, too, became part of the carriage of the lost. The air in the train carriage was thick, oppressive, as though the very walls themselves were closing in. Adam stood at the far end, his eyes like two dark voids, staring into mine with an unsettling calmness. The low hum of the train's wheels on the tracks was the only sound, but it felt like a distant noise, as if the train itself was no longer part of the world I knew. You're standing in the heart of it now, Michael, Adam said, his voice smooth like velvet, but with an edge to it, sharp and cold. Every rule has a consequence. You've broken them. Now you see what comes next. I could feel my heartbeat pounding in my throat, each beat echoing in my ears. I glanced around the carriage, hoping for something, anything, that might help me, But all I saw were the same blank walls, the same worn leather seats, and the same pale passengers who seemed to know more than they let on. Their eyes never moved. Their faces were expressionless, like they were caught in a loop too tight to escape. I tried to swallow, but my mouth felt dry, like the air had been sucked out of the room. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. "You know why you're here, don't you?" Adam continued, his grin widening, almost to the point of mockery. "You came looking for answers, Michael, and answers are what you'll get. But remember, every truth has a price." I couldn't answer him. What could I say? I was trapped in this godforsaken train, hurtling through time, with no way of knowing what was real anymore. My brother, my only family, was lost to this cursed place. The rules. They were no longer just warnings. They were threats, promises of something worse if I failed to obey. But what if I refused? What if I didn't play along? The last rule echoed in my mind, haunting me, sending a chill down my spine. If you break the final rule, you stay forever. A sudden, sharp memory cut through the fog of my brain. The radio. The truth. It had been calling me from the moment I boarded the train, whispering that the rules were more than just rules. They were choices. Choices with consequences. And Adam was the one who made sure those consequences were paid. "You've learned them all," Adam said, taking a step forward, his movements graceful, almost predatory. "You think you could just walk away from this? From us? From the rules? But you've broken one more. The most dangerous of all." I took a step back, the floorboards creaking beneath my feet. My chest tightened. "What do you mean?" Adam's smile grew, and for a moment, I thought I saw something else in his eyes. Something darker, something ancient. "The final rule, Michael. The one you haven't realized yet. The one you're about to break." I didn't know what he meant. I wanted to scream at him, demand answers, but something in my gut told me that even speaking out of turn might push me further into the abyss. I'd seen what happened to the others. Those poor souls who had broken a rule, too many. They had become part of the train, trapped in its endless loop, wandering its halls like shadows. Was that going to be my fate, too? "You're not just a passenger," Adam said softly, his voice like a whisper now. "You're the reason the train exists. You're the one who called it into being. Your guilt, your regrets, they've fueled this place. And now, you want to leave. You want to go back to your world, your time. But you can't." I shook my head. "I don't." "You will understand," Adam interrupted, his tone hardening. "You can't run from the truth forever. Every person here is tied to this train in some way. And now you're part of it. You always have been." I looked around the carriage again, my breath quickening as I began to see what I hadn't noticed before. The passengers were staring at me now. Their eyes were no longer empty. They were filled with an intense, silent pleading. They knew the rules, the price of defying them. They were warning me. Suddenly, a cold draft swept through the train, extinguishing the lights for a moment. The shadows in the corners grew deeper, thicker. I could almost hear whispers, low and indistinct, as if the very air around me was speaking, urging me to do something, to make a choice. I stepped toward Adam, my voice shaking but determined. "I won't break your rules. Not anymore." Adam's eyes flashed with something close to amusement. "It's too late for that, Michael." And then he said it, the words that sent my stomach plummeting into a pit of dread. "To survive, you must break the final rule." I froze. The last rule. The one I didn't know. The one I couldn't avoid. "You've been living by these rules, Michael," Adam continued, his voice cold as ice. "But now, the truth is, the only way out of here is to destroy the system. To break it completely. To tell the truth. All of it. Or you'll stay here forever." My mind raced. Tell the truth? What did he mean? I already felt like I had revealed everything. The guilt, the pain, the mistakes that haunted me. But now, in that moment, I realized it wasn't enough. I had to face it all. I had to face myself. And if I didn't, if I failed to speak the final truth, I would become another lost soul aboard this cursed train. Adam's smile widened, knowing he had me cornered. "The train doesn't want passengers, Michael. It wants bargains. And you've already paid the price for yours." I felt the weight of the decision crash down on me like a ton of bricks. To stay silent was to accept my fate. To break the rule was to break everything I had believed in, everything I had held on to. But in that moment, I knew there was only one way forward. One way to escape the nightmare. I swallowed hard, forcing the words out through the tightness in my throat. The truth is, I'm the one who broke the first rule. I never should have come. I was never supposed to be here. Adam's eyes gleamed. Finally. And as those words left my lips, the world around me shattered, the train groaning like it was alive, twisting, breaking apart. I closed my eyes, bracing for whatever was coming next. I could feel the train shake beneath my feet, as if it were struggling, its very bones creaking in protest. The walls seemed to be warping. One moment they were smooth, and the next, cracks splintered through the surfaces, exposing what looked like another dimension, a space where time itself unraveled. I could hear the whispers again, louder this time, more frantic, as though the train itself was screaming for release. I didn't care. I had only one thing on my mind: finding my brother. I reached for his hand, gripping it tightly, feeling the coldness of his skin. It was like holding a phantom's touch, so fragile, so unreal. But he was there. I knew it, even if his eyes still stared blankly ahead. His body was stuck, trapped in time, suspended in a strange limbo between the living and the dead. I pulled harder, dragging him along as the train lurched and swayed. The other passengers didn't move. They couldn't. They were frozen in place, stuck in whatever moment the train had decided to trap them in. It was like walking through a museum of the lost, where every face was familiar, yet terrifyingly alien. Some stared into the distance, others into mirrors that didn't reflect their true selves. They were trapped in their regrets, their broken rules. I ran faster, the metallic clatter of the train blending with the distant echo of Adam's voice. I could hear him, still speaking through the loudspeakers, like he was everywhere and nowhere at once. Obey the rules, or be replaced. It was the same line, over and over, as if trying to burrow into my mind, make me believe it. But I couldn't. I wouldn't. Not again. We reached the last carriage, the one that should have been empty, the one Adam had warned me about. The door was wide open. My heart hammered in my chest. I could hear it, the sound of my brother's pulse, a steady beat that was somehow out of sync with everything around us. I pulled him into the room, stepping over the threshold just as the lights flickered one last time. And then it happened. The train screamed. Time fractured in front of me. The world bent in ways that didn't make sense. The walls stretched, twisted into the shape of impossible angles, like the train itself had become alive. The floor beneath me wasn't solid anymore. It felt like walking on water, the edges of reality blurring, dissolving. I could hear the crash of something far off, distant yet immediate, the sound of everything collapsing in on itself. "Michael," my brother whispered, his voice weak, like he was coming back from some deep, dark place. I froze. For a moment, I thought he was lost again, that maybe this was another illusion, a cruel trick the train was playing on me. But no, his eyes moved. He blinked. He saw me. I pulled him closer, my heart racing. "You're awake," I muttered, almost unbelieving. But before I could say anything more, I heard the hiss of the doors. They opened, not to another station, not to any kind of escape, but to a rolling blackness that seemed to swallow the entire world. It was the train, pulling us into its final death spiral. The light from the outside flickered and vanished, and all that remained was darkness. We had no choice. The doors were closing, but they didn't shut fast enough. I took one last look at the shifting time that surrounded us, the walls bending, the passengers trapped in their frozen states, and I made the decision. I leaped. I didn't know where we'd land, or if we'd land at all, but in that moment, it didn't matter. I had to escape, even if it meant breaking the last rule. And then, in the blink of an eye, the world shifted again. The noise of the train's death rattle was gone. The chaos, the time, the people, all of it stopped. The train was gone. We were on solid ground. The air smelled like rain, fresh and crisp. The sky was a deep shade of blue, the kind that only existed in dreams. I could hear the chirp of distant birds, the murmur of life continuing as if nothing had happened, as if the train hadn't pulled us into its twisted web, hadn't shown us the horrors within its iron walls. I glanced around, disoriented. We were standing in the middle of a city street, but not Chicago. This was somewhere else. Somewhere ordinary, somewhere it felt like we belonged. I looked at my brother, who was finally awake, blinking as though coming out of fog. I started, but the words caught in my throat. He was here. He was alive. Where are we? He asked, his voice shaky but clear. He didn't remember the train. He didn't remember the rules. He didn't remember the horrors. I didn't answer. There were no answers. Instead, I pulled him away from the street, trying to put some distance between us and whatever lingering shadow still haunted our escape. But as I looked over my shoulder, I caught sight of something. A figure, standing in the distance. A man in a conductor's hat. He tipped it, his grin wide and knowing, and the chill ran down my spine. I turned away quickly, pushing my brother forward. I had escaped, but I knew the truth now. The train wasn't done with us. It never would be. And, as much as I wanted to forget everything, I couldn't. The train had been a prison, but it was also a part of us now. A part of my soul, something that would never let go. And somewhere, deep down, I knew the rules would come for me again. The moment we stepped off the train, the cold, damp air hit me like a slap in the face. For a second, I couldn't quite believe it. The platform was real, solid under my feet. No fog, no strange whispers. Just the normal hum of city life. The usual chill of an autumn morning in Chicago. But something wasn't right. I glanced around. There were no signs of the train. No platform 13B. The train, the nightmare we just lived through, was gone. Vanished like it had never existed. The station was busy, normal, bustling with the usual hurried crowd. People moved with purpose, faces lost in their own world. Not a single one looking our way. But I could feel it, a strange weight in the air, a buzzing silence in the back of my mind. I looked down at my brother. He was standing beside me, rubbing his eyes as if waking from a long, deep sleep. His hair was messy, his clothes a bit more ragged than I remembered. He blinked at me, as if seeing me for the first time. "Michael," he said, voice hoarse. Where are we?" His expression was blank, like he was just coming out of a daze. His confusion twisted something inside me. How could he not remember? How could he not remember the train? The rules? The nightmare we just endured? The freezing cold of 1923? But before I could say anything, I noticed something. He didn't seem to recognize the look on my face. He didn't seem to know what had happened. How we barely escaped. "Michael," he repeated, this time his tone a little more urgent. "Where the hell are we? What happened?" I opened my mouth, trying to form the words, but they caught in my throat. What happened? What the hell had happened? 1 minute, we were fighting to survive in a twisted version of time. The next, we were standing on a quiet platform, as though the past year had been some bad dream. I looked around once more, scanning the familiar sights of the train station, the old brick walls, the neon lights blinking overhead. Nothing about this felt like a dream. It was too real. The people walking by, no one had even stopped to look at us. It was like we were invisible. Or maybe it was just my mind playing tricks on me. "Michael, are you listening to me?" my brother said, his voice sharper now, pulling me back to reality. "Where the hell is this? What happened?" For a moment, I couldn't answer. It felt like I was trapped in some kind of sick joke. This was all too real, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't quite back. My heart started to race. What if it was another trap? What if we hadn't escaped? You don't remember?" I asked slowly, trying to piece together what was happening. He looked at me, confused. "Remember what?" I took a step back, my pulse quickening. His face, his eyes, it was like I was staring at a stranger. My brother, but not the brother I'd fought to save. Not the one who'd been lost in that cursed loop with me. This was someone else. The same face, but not the same person. I swallowed hard, tried to force the lump out of my throat. "You don't remember the train? Platform 13B. The rules." I could hear the panic rising in my own voice. I took a step back, eyes scanning the crowd for something, anything that would make sense of this nightmare. My brother shook his head. "Man, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. Are you okay?" I ran my fingers through my hair, still trying to wrap my mind around what was happening. No way. It couldn't be. Could it? He grabbed my shoulder, shaking me slightly. "Come on, let's get out of here. You're freaking me out. I'm starving. Let's grab some breakfast." I stared at him for a moment longer, my thoughts spinning. Breakfast. A normal day. Normal life. He was fine. He looked fine. But he wasn't fine. He couldn't be. Yeah, Sure, I muttered, feeling numb. Let's go. But as I turned away from the platform, something caught my eye in the distance. A man standing under the shadow of a street lamp. He was staring directly at us. No, at me. Even from this distance, I could feel his eyes, like they were burning into me. He wore an old conductor's uniform, the same kind I'd seen 100 times on the train. The same hat, same smile. But it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile that made your skin crawl. The kind that said he knew something you didn't. I froze. The man tipped his hat. His face, pale, worn, but strangely familiar, was locked in a grin. It couldn't be. Michael, what is it? My brother asked, his voice a low whisper. What's wrong? I didn't answer him. My heart was pounding in my chest, my legs frozen to the spot. The man took a step forward, still staring, still smiling. He raised his hand, as if to wave. And then, in that moment, I realized something that made my stomach drop. The train hadn't let us go. Not really. I turned to my brother, trying to keep my voice steady. We're not done yet, I whispered. We're never getting out of here. But my brother had already turned, walking ahead, not hearing me. The man in the conductor's hat was gone, swallowed by the crowd. Everything seemed to go back to normal, like a glitch in the system had never even happened. But I could still feel it, that cold, crawling sense that we were still trapped, that we hadn't escaped. And the train, it was still waiting for us, somewhere in the shadows.